4 teams of Muslim Arab hijackers outwitted the world's most sophisticated defense system. Standard operating procedures. When the FAA sees any sign that a plane is in trouble, they've lost the transponder signal, they've lost radio contact, or the plane has gone significantly off course and they're not able to pull it back within a minute. The FAA then notifies the U.S. military, and then it calls the nearest Air Force base that has fighters on alert. They scramble planes, and generally this whole operation takes 10 minutes. And 2 fighters will be on the tail of the plane, and there are standard signals then to deal with it. Normally I say within 10 minutes, yet on that day that did not happen. Why not? Well, we've been given 3 different stories what the military did. The first story was that we didn't send up any planes until after the Pentagon was struck. And that would have meant about 90 minutes after the first sign that a plane was in trouble, maybe hijacked. This story was told by General Richard Myers, who was the acting chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on 9/11. It was also told by Mike Snyder, who was a spokesman for NORAD. So they surely knew what they were talking about. And yet, within a couple days, people started saying, that doesn't sound very good. That sounds like a stand down. 90 minutes? You generally intercept in 10 minutes. What happened? So they came up with a second story. And according to the second story, yeah, we sent planes up, but we couldn't get there on time because the FAA had been so late notifying us that we tried, but in each case we got there late. Well, early members of the 9/11 movement did the math. And they said, well, look, even if the FAA was as late as you say, which is hard to believe, and, nobody from the FAA was fired, and, they would be 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late notifying, but that's fine. Even if that were true, you still had time to get there. You certainly could have intercepted the second airliner, the second one that hit the World Trade Center, and certainly the one that hit the Pentagon. We're talking 40 minutes there. So why didn't you? Looks like a stand down, or at least a slow down order. So that was when I came into the movement, and when I wrote The New Pearl Harbor, that's the story I told, and that's the problem I pointed out. That book came out in the fall, the very end of 2003, almost right at the beginning of 2004. And of course, at that time, the 9/11 Commission was going on, and it didn't complete its work until July of 2004. Well, when that study came out, they have a brand new story. The new story is, no, that wasn't true. And it's unfortunate that story was told because it made it look like the military did have time to intercept. They admitted that those guys who did the math were right. There was time to intercept if that story was true. But they said, no, that wasn't true. Yeah, there was some notification of the first flight, Flight 11. But the second flight, the one that hit the South Tower, the military didn't know about that it was hijacked until after it hit the tower. And the Flight 77, the one that allegedly hit the Pentagon, you were not notified at 9:24, the way you said. No, you didn't know about that until after the Pentagon was struck. And certainly Flight 93, about which there's been considerable speculation based on considerable evidence that the military shot it down, you didn't know about that flight either. So you couldn't have scrambled planes, and that's the new story. Now, most people didn't read the 9/11 Commission report. It's like the Bible, highly praised and seldom read. So everybody assumes the 9/11 report is definitive, but very few people had read it. So hardly anybody knew this new story. So just a few weeks ago, a story came out in Vanity Fair called 9/11 Live, the NORAD Tapes. And it emphasized that these tapes that NORAD had developed, had all along, my point is they were fabricated later, that they disprove the second story and prove this new story. And that's why the 9/11 Commission is telling the new story. It's based on the tapes. So when you read the Danish translation of New Pearl Harbor, you won't know that. So to learn this, you have to actually get my next book. Now, what are the problems in this new story? Well, first of all, they portray the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, as just enormously incompetent that day, from top to bottom. Now, the FAA, to work for the FAA, you have to pass very rigorous tests. You have to be a very competent person who can react well under pressure. And there are all the signs that that's the truth, because the FAA orders scrambles over 100 times a year. The year prior to 9/11, there were 129. So this is something they do about 2 or 3 times a week, and it evidently goes flawlessly. And yet that day, nobody could do anything right. Not the controllers at Boston or Indianapolis. And when they finally called to Herndon, then people there would sit on it. And finally, somebody might call Washington FAA headquarters, and they would sit around debating. They say, well, okay, that plane, 2 planes have already hit the World Trade Center. This plane has a bomb on it. Should we call the military? Oh, gee, I don't know. I mean, it's just beyond belief. It's cartoon stuff. And actually, they have made a cartoon version now of the 9/11 Commission report, and that's highly appropriate. Because some of that dialogue is just comic stuff, and yet it's been believed. At least half of the Americans are still in this trance of 9/11, and most of our journalists are still in this trance of 9/11, or else their corporate owners tell them they can't say otherwise. Who knows what the real story is? But up until just the last few weeks, they've not revealed any of the problems in the story. Anyway, that's one problem with the new story. Another problem is that it is the third story the military has told. And normally, if you have a suspect in a crime and he keeps changing his story, you start getting suspicious. So let's take, I'll use an American name, let's say Charlie Smith robbed, they suspect that Charlie robbed this bank on Saturday night in this little town. And so the police come to him and say, Charlie, where were you Saturday night? Charlie says, I was at the movies. No, Charlie, movie theater's been closed all week. Oh, yeah, that's right, Saturday night, that's when I was with my girlfriend. No, Charlie, we checked with her, and she was home with her husband. And so Charlie says, oh, yeah, that's right. I was home reading my Bible. You're probably not going to believe it. And yet that's exactly the situation we have with the military. They tell the one story, say, that doesn't sound right. Oh, no, that's right. We did tried to intercept, but we were late. No, you could have gotten there on time. And, oh, that's right. We weren't even told about the flights. So... Oh,